something changed for me, particularly when I moved to Detroit, Michigan. About the year back, I think I moved there in 1998, but I really started seeing this around the year 2000. I began to meet many people whose lives were in crisis, but it wasn't the exception rather than the rule. I realized how many people in America, a state of crisis and despair is the rule and not the exception. And it wasn't because of the proverbial, it could have happened to anybody type stuff. It was because of bad public policy. It was because they didn't have health care. It was because they couldn't live on just one job. It's because they didn't really have what it would take to feed their children consistently. It was because they lived in neighborhoods that were so torn and decimated. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I'm old enough, I could trace back, and I knew exactly what had gone on there. That this was the flowering of a change in American society, and specifically a change in American economics. Because with the Reagan Revolution around 1980, when did it exactly happen? It was definitely, even if it started before Reagan, it took off. Was the idea that it wasn't so important to make sure that the majority of people had a shot. That was no longer what we were going to adhere to. Rather, there was this trickle-down economic nonsense that if you just made it easier for the stockholders in a corporation to make the money, that would be good because they would become job creators. And then since they would become job creators, all that money would trickle down and it would lift all boats. But what actually happened is that it threw millions of people off the boats they had, and it left millions of people without even a life vest. And it led to a $50 trillion transfer of wealth away from the hands of 90% of the people. Why is that? Well, because the business model for that stockholder class was never job creation. It was job elimination. It was worker exploitation. It was squeezing every last dollar out of people who were the workers so that the stockholders, at the expense of other stakeholders, could accumulate wealth. The other stakeholders are the workers. The other stakeholders is the community, safety. And so before that time, like companies couldn't even be paid with couldn't even do stock buybacks. It was illegal. CEOs couldn't be paid with stock options. It was illegal because as soon as CEOs were paid with stock options, there's this conflict of interest, this inherent conflict of interest between the needs of the workers and the financial well-being of the CEO. And now, if you're in the top 20% of earners of the United States, you don't necessarily see anything of what I'm talking about. If you're among the top earners, the top 20% of the earners, the economy is doing well, and there are all kinds of ways for us to buffer ourselves emotionally from the vast sea of human despair that accumulated as a result of all this change in American society.